Test. Alright, Tech Bob here. Gonna fix an iPad from start to finish. I've had this one charging for a bit, so it should be pretty charged. Well, guess it needs more time. 65 is a pretty good percentage though to start with, so we're gonna go ahead and fix it. On the portable land meter 6-port charger, it's pulling 1.6, which is okay. iPads are kind of all over the place as far as what they pull, depending on the model. Some newer iPads pull more. This is an iPad 7. Unplug the charger. See if I can ground this. So I actually have, I don't know if you can see the camera, this is the common ground point of the anti-static mat wire. I'm actually going to ground it, so I'm going to connect it to my just unplugged a bunch of stuff. Did that kill anything? Nope, camera's still gone. I guess it's plugged in USB, so we're good. Alright, so I have my wrist strap on. I'm in a hotel, so I do have carpet on the floor. This should help protect the iPad. So first I'm gonna turn it off, or actually, let's test it. I'm replacing the Digitizer anyways, so it doesn't matter if the Digi's bad. But we'll grab the icon, move it around. This one's pretty cracked, so I'm not gonna go too far. I don't want to cut my fingers. Test camera, it's rear camera, front camera. Looks good. Speakers. Let's go to sounds. That's working. Turn on, change those buttons. Buttons are working. On the home button side, you really just want to test for Touch ID. You don't have to save the fingerprint, just scan a couple times, hit home, make sure it goes home. And then in general, just check for frame damage. Function wise, there's not a whole lot else to check. The charging port I've been testing. This one looks a little bit dirty, but nothing too crazy, so I'm gonna turn this off. I'm gonna turn my heating pad on, have it a little up and to the left so we can get it in frame. Oh, hit the camera. Here's my heating pad. Turning it on, setting it to 75. Put that, here, I'm gonna move all the other tools out of the way so you can see heating. And put its green side down. While this is going, I'll talk through a couple things just to kind of bide the time while this heats up. I do recommend heating it like 2 to 5 minutes. 75 degrees Celsius is what I set it to. It's not hot enough to damage the iPad, but it is hot enough to help neutralize the adhesive, so that's what we want to do. We'll let this heat up. A couple things, so I am on an anti-static mat. That just helps with cleanup. I'm going to be using this blade holder with flat blade. Some people use Isessimos, there's other tools out there, but this seems to work the best. It has a couple functions. So one is for opening the device. It's thin enough to insert in between the glass and the frame. And it also is great for cleaning the frame, so you can scrape away the old adhesive. Danger though is if you slip, you don't want to hit the battery or any other components, so you have to be careful. But that would happen with any tool, just this one is sharper, so you have to be careful. I also like to use these really thin opening picks. These right here, they're a little bit thinner and larger than the standard like guitar style picks. These are, I guess, closer to like bass picks, but these are great as spacers. My process is to start with the blade and then insert one of these and kind of work your way along, because the blade seems to be a little bit harsher. It's going to cause more cracks to happen, and your goal here is to try to get the thing off as close to one piece as you can, just because shards of glass are harder to deal with than full pieces, and these help with that. In conjunction with this, we have a alcohol dispenser bottle. This is an old one I've had. This is an old E-Tech pin. I just poked the top of it. That's the cap. The way these work is you pump this, or you push it down a couple times. It fills that reservoir, and then you dip whatever you're going to be using in there. What this is done, the reason this is done is it helps, the alcohol helps kind of cancel out the adhesive property. Like that doesn't make sense. the sticky property, I guess, of the adhesive, so it won't hold as much. So combination of heat and this really helps separate it. We'll also use the blade in here as well to dip it. And I would say this is ready when you start to feel the heat coming through the back of the frame. I'm gonna flip it over just to feel the front. When it's hot to the touch, pretty much ready to go. So that is pretty hot to the touch. My general rule of thumb is if I can't touch it for more than 5 seconds without it feeling like it's gonna burn, which don't want anyone to burn themselves, but you know what I mean. Just if it feels hot to the touch, whatever that is to you, you're good to start. So what I'm gonna do is move the heating pad out of the way. I'm gonna leave it on over there because I might need to reheat it. I'm gonna take my flat blade, I'm gonna insert right here, just to the right of where these antenna bars are. You have to be careful where these cellular antennas are because they can tear. They are flex cable. You can't see me on camera, but I'm actually wearing safety glasses too, so that's important because you don't want this glass to shoot up to your face. So here's where I mentioned I'm gonna take my guitar pick, get that bottle in view, dip it into alcohol, slide it in, and replace my blade with it. Like I said, this method helps keep the glass a little bit more together versus just using the blade the whole way. You do have to use a blade every now and then to get the glass back up because the guitar pick doesn't do great where it's really shattered. So like right there, got it back up, insert another guitar pick, keep working down. If you get big chunks like this that come off, that's okay. You try to clean up as you go so you don't have shards of glass everywhere. And iPads, pretty much all of them have what we like to call danger zones where you don't want to take your blade and insert. These cellular antennas are one of them, so you can see the bar back here that indicates that. You have your power flex area over here, your cameras, obviously you don't want to stab those. Anything that's inside of the painted border, so the edges right here, you don't want to go past because that would mean you're hitting your LCD. And 90%, if not more, of iPad repairs are digi only, and that's good because it's a cheaper part. You're looking at probably 15 to 20 bucks versus the LCD, which is probably closer to the 50 to 70 range. I forget what the price is of each LCD, but it definitely is more. So you don't want to accidentally damage that LCD and then end up having to replace it for free. And I can feel the iPad, so I'm touching it right now. It's pretty much just warm to the touch, so I'm gonna take the iPad as is, put it back on the heating pad for a couple minutes. While that's going on, I'm going to clean my mat a little bit. I don't have a dustpan with me, so I'm actually gonna use the flats or the edge of my Sesamo or my premium opening tool, kind of as like a sweeping tool. If you've ever been to a nicer restaurant, you've seen those little metal things that the waiters use for like crumbs and stuff. That's kind of the style that we're using here. And the cleanup kind of serves two purposes. One, it's for safety. The less shards of glass you have around, the less of a chance something's gonna stab you. And two, you don't want to damage the iPad in the process either. If you, say, open the iPad and then a piece of glass is stuck to your hand and it falls on the LCD and you don't catch it, it could cause damage to it too. I'm gonna check my audio levels real quick. It looks like it's picking me up fine. That probably sounded closer because I was closer to my laptop. This is just a test. I might upload it, I might not. It's kind of just I'm doing this anyway, so why not record it? Alright, that should be good. And typically when you get better at this, you don't have to reheat a whole lot. I think I'm at like the 2 to 3 time area. Some of our guys that do these iPads in about 30 minutes pretty much only heat it once on the heating pad and then are good to open it the rest of the way. One tool I actually don't have with me right now, they're actually in the truck with the customers tool set that I'll be training tomorrow is a heat gun. The heat gun helps because once you get to the point where almost all of this is separated, you can actually lift the glass and heat at the same time. So you're using the iPad's own weight to kind of separate it. You can do that slightly with the heating pad, but not a whole lot. I'm talking too much, so it's cooling down faster. Try to get it in this next go. And this one wasn't too badly cracked. You might get some iPads where it's like, what's the best way to say it? The glass is powdered, so you're dealing with basically sand particles of glass. Those are a little bit harder to open because you're literally dealing with hundreds of little pieces. Hopefully you don't get a whole lot of those. Typically we see those being the ones that were like dropped and then skid like across concrete, or they have pretty heavy frame damage, or like it was broken and then broken some more. You never know what happens with the customer's hand, so just kind of making guesses at what it was. I'm gonna go in on this side. You gotta be careful with this edge, especially because there's not a whole lot of space between the Digi and the LCD. So I'm actually lifting up on the Digi itself. I do use my hands a lot on this. Really wish I had a heat gun, because what I'll do here is I'll take my heat gun, run it along the side as I slide like my guitar pick or something else. So what I'm gonna try here, get in there, take my guitar pick, put slightly in some alcohol, place it, and run the guitar pick down the side. Remember, you don't want to go in too deep just to hit that LCD. Got most of that side done. I'm gonna crack on me a little bit, so there you go. So I mentioned earlier, you want to try to avoid that because it just makes it tougher to clean up. So far we've got top, we've got left, now we're working on bottom. There's another danger zone area. You have your, these aren't cellular antennas, these are Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS. I forget which one's which, but they basically do those functions for the device. You want to avoid tearing these two. What I like to do is get to the point where I can see it, so that I know exactly where it's at. It's roughly in this area. If you notice what I'm doing with the Digi, I'm actually lifting up on it as I pry. It's kind of cooled down on me again, so I'm going to put it back under, or back on the heating pad. Avoid doing what I just did, just a habit from doing this so much to use your hand to sweep glass. Usually a whole lot doesn't happen, but all it takes is one shard to catch you the wrong way, it goes in your hand. The more you do this too with heat, you start to build up calluses on your fingers, which help protect you against those little shards of glass. But if you're starting out or don't do a whole lot of iPads, it's definitely not advice to sweep with your hands. And I'm trying. One of the reasons it might be that I'm heating it more is I'm not heating it long enough. So I think I'm probably heating it in like 60-second to 2-minute increments. You probably want to do closer to 5 minutes. So like there. Let me see if that does enough. Another technique that is sometimes used is you can do this directly on the heating pad. The biggest thing there though is you're going to need to wear some type of gloves, heat resistant gloves, because if you're working on it on the heating pad, it does tend to get pretty hot. Right here, I'm going to try to avoid cracking this thing. Especially around the home button area, you want to try to keep it intact. Because when you separate the home button from the original screen, if the glass is all cracked, it's a pain to get all that up. those shards slightly. It's another danger area. You really don't want to insert your tool over there because that's where the home button is, the flex cable. See, this is where I mentioned having that heat gun really helps. I said it like 10 times, I really wish I had a heat gun. Most people ask us, do I need a heat gun and a heating pad to do this? My personal opinion is yes, because it makes this last part where it's almost up way easier to get past. So I'm trying to avoid really cracking this thing. Using my guitar picks. Kind of a leverage point. Some alcohol in that last one. You do have to watch this too. If you let the digi sit for too long back down, you're going to end up letting it re-adhere. You can also use some scissors like this to cut adhesive that's kind of just hanging on. And there we go, we got it open. So from here, what you want to do, you can use something to prop the LCD up. The digi up. I'm gonna use the alcohol bottle like that. We have 4 Phillips screws. Don't go crazy with cleanup just yet. It's recommended that you do it with the LCD off. That way you don't have to worry about shards of glass everywhere. You do have to clean up where your screws are so you can actually take them out. You'll notice on the camera I have a couple shards of glass on the Digitizer, the LCD. Big tip here, don't touch the LCD. I think I had maybe one spot where my guitar pick slipped a little bit. That's not too bad, but the reason for that is when we get asked, what's the best way to clean an LCD? The answer sounds kind of, I guess, smart, but it's to not have to clean the LCD, which that is the best way, because these LCDs, the way they're designed is they have lots of they're porous, so they have lots of little holes in them, microscopic to where you can't see them, and any type of oil or especially liquids will seep into them, and they also are very sensitive to scratches. So if you sit there and have fingerprints all over it, it's not great for cleaning it up. So now on the iPad 7 and I believe 6s as well, I'm not 100% sure, but at least the 7's and newer, Apple put this like black elastic adhesive to hold the LCD down. So if you try to lift it up just as is right now, you will crack it. Best tip I can offer here, I like to use these curved tweezers. You kind of just dig in down there to get underneath that plastic. You want to be careful though to not go between that metal piece on the back of the LCD and the plastic, because then you'll damage it. And that's all I had to do, because what you're doing is breaking that seal. Once you do that, you are free to lift it. There is a little bit down here too on these corners, so if you grab it and kind of pull upwards, like towards the top edge of the iPad, you're basically untucking it. So there it is, untucked. I'm going to take out the 3 screws that are holding my flex cables down, or my bracket that covers my flex cable connection, which here we're going to be dealing with a total of 3 flex cables under the bracket. We have 2 for the Digi, and then we have 1 for the LCD. Our home button also has to be disconnected before we remove the Digi, but that's in a different area, which I'll show in a second. You notice I'm holding the LCD up at a 90-degree angle. You don't want to go past that because the connection's right here. You don't want to either damage the connect on the board or the flex. Get underneath that with the spudger, twist, disconnect. Put this in a safe place where you're not going to touch it. I'm going to put it behind me. Now we're going to disconnect the 2 flex cables from our Digitizer. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. There we go. So I unplugged my LCD from here. Digi1 there, Digi2, 2 connectors. And really every iPad will have 2 connectors for the Digi. Next I'm going to unplug my home button, which is going to be underneath this black piece of tape. Carefully pull that tape up. You don't want to have accidentally grab the connector. I just like to put it over here. And then you could technically use the tweezers for this, but it's just safer to use plastic. So I'm going to use the flat end of my spudger there to lift up the gate. I'm going to use my tweezers again. It's safer to use the blunt tweezers here. Don't have mine handy right now, so I just use these. Because if you use these and you're not careful, you want to use the flat parts. If you use the pointer parts, you can puncture the cable. Then you have this little rubber spacer thing they put on the home button flex. Get your spudger underneath that, pull it up. Grab it. Then you're going to take your spudger, dip it in a little bit of alcohol, and slide it underneath the cable. It is adhered to the frame. And then at this point, let me zoom out real quick so you can see. You do want this type of motion. You basically pull the Digi down. If it cracks a little more, that's okay. And you just want to be careful when you're doing this. The adhesive doesn't catch the home button flex and damage it. So the next step here is I'm going to actually clean my frame. While that's happening, I'm going to put the Digi face side down on the heating pad. That's going to do is heat the area from my home button, so I can get that off next. If you have not repaired an iPad and you're not aware, you do have to use the same home button that came on the original screen for Touch ID to still work. If you don't care about Touch ID, cool, you can get the Digitizer with the home button pre-installed, which saves you a little bit of time. Now for the cleanup, like I said, you have to be careful here. Another thing I haven't done yet, which I'll do it for the sake of the video. When you've repaired hundreds of iPads, it can still happen to you. So I'm gonna do it just to show best practice. Our guys don't really have the issue happen, but as I'm cleaning this, if I hold that power button, or say I forgot to turn the device off, my battery is connected right now. And I'll show it here on that screw right here. If my iPad turns back on while I'm cleaning it and then I plug my LCD in, I can damage my backlight circuit, which then results in either this wavy effect around the edges or no backlight, which would both be bad. So to make sure that doesn't happen, I'm going to take the battery screw out and get a opening pick or guitar pick. Going to slide it just below the connector area. So I went right there. Basically, just want to lift it a little bit. You can do another one on the other side if you want. The biggest thing here though is you do not want to slide it directly in between the connector, this connector. Oh, I'm way out of focus, sorry. You don't want to slide it in between this connector because the pins on it can get damaged if the guitar pick hits it. So I got it up pretty tall there. I'm gonna take one out, I don't really need to. And if a little alcohol gets on the battery, it's okay. You just don't want to drown it, obviously. So now I know for sure my battery is disconnected. My iPad's not going to turn on. I'm at 0 risk for backlight damage. So I'm going to take my blade, work it all the way around. And the goal here is 2 things. 1, to remove as much adhesive, old adhesive and residue as you can. And 2, definitely remove any shard of glass left behind. Because if you do not do that, you're going to end up with either a Digi that won't sit down, or you're going to crack your new Digi, which is a pain because you got to do this all over again. Now I'll actually switch to my spudger in some areas, so like this plastic piece right here, because I don't want to shave away other plastic, and the knife has a tendency to do that. Again, sorry, I didn't realize it was zoomed in. It's the downside of being the actor and director at the same time. The cool thing about your spudger is it is less likely to cause damage, but it's still possible. If I slipped with enough force towards the battery, I could technically puncture it. So we see that too happen from some customers. They'll say, I was using a plastic tool. Sometimes it's more dangerous to use the plastic tool in the wrong way than to use a metal tool at all. So just want to make sure you're using the tool the right way and being careful with either. And now I'm going to switch back to metal. I'm back on metal. So I'm kind of doing a scraping motion. I am pointing the blade slightly outwards towards the edge of the frame because I would rather it slip up and over and hit my anti-static mat than slip inwards and hit my battery. Notice as this process continues, your blade might come loose in the holder. Just make sure that if that happens, you're tightening it because you don't want the blade to slip out while you're doing this for obvious reasons. Very careful near that wise antenna. You may notice I pick up glass a lot with my hands. Again, if you're wearing gloves, you can probably do that too. But without gloves, I don't recommend it because you are more likely to get a piece of glass in your finger. And a couple other safety things. I don't have these things present because I'm a little bit limited in this hotel room. But two things, additional safety things you want to have. One is a battery safe in case of emergency battery kit, which basically means if you accidentally puncture the battery and smoke starts to happen, you have something to put it out. The simplest and cheapest option is just a wide mouth bucket with some sand. Process for that is it's not necessarily you pick up the device that's on fire or smoking, put it in there. You throw that sand on it because that way you have zero contact with the hot thing and it puts it out pretty fast. Second safety thing. Oh, that's what it was. I keep talking about cutting and accidentally getting glass in your finger. Band-aids are also super important. Last thing the customer wants is blood all over their device, so you want to make sure that if you do happen to puncture your skin and start slightly bleeding, that you cover it up. Obviously make sure you're good first before you continue the repair. I'm not saying make sure you power through. Usually it's not too bad. I don't think I've ever seen a major cut or bleed, I guess is the best way to say it, which sounds weird. Alright, so I got pretty much all my frame clean. Gonna do some cleanup again. Just trying to get all my glass away from my work area, which is right here in the center. This cleanup process time does vary. Sometimes it takes a couple minutes, sometimes it takes 5 to 10 minutes. It all depends on how badly cracked the glass was. That's why I'll go back to what I said originally. You want to try to get it off in as little piece, not little. You don't want little pieces. What's the best way to say this? You don't want to have a lot of pieces individually. You want bigger chunks. That way it's less cleanup. That makes sense. Let's see. You have little microfibers too. That helps cleaning up this gunk. Kind of just balling it up and sticking it to the side of the mat. Bottom edge looks good. And shards of glass are the biggest enemy here because they'll definitely crack your new Digi. And if you have a little bit of residue left over, it's not the end of the world. You just want to try to clear as much off as you can because anything you leave behind is going to cause an uneven fit of the digitizer. It'll cause some issues. So next step here goes one of two ways. Let me grab the part real quick. And it depends on the part. So the digitizer I have here does not have the adhesive pre-installed. Some do, some don't. It kind of just varies. I prefer the ones without the adhesive installed, so I can put the adhesive down myself, which is what I'll be doing in this video. But on other digitizers that have it pre-installed, you can definitely use that. So let's see what I'll set my digitizer up first. So a couple things I need to do. First one is adhere the flex cable to the frame, or sorry, to the digitizer. Now there's a plastic on this. This one looks like it might be cut. It is, but what I'm gonna do anyways, I'm gonna lift up the plastic because if you install this on top of the plastic, when you peel it off, it's gonna just lift your flex back up. I don't know if you can tell what I'm doing, but I'm trying to avoid touching the edge there. I think I just got something sticky on this plastic. Shard of glass too, so we're just gonna pull the whole plastic off. We just have to be careful to not touch the inside because then it's gonna require some cleanup, which is annoying. Alright, so we have two parts of this flex cable. We're gonna stick the smaller one down first. Let me zoom in. Get that in frame. Turn the camera. There we go. So I'm gonna peel off the first piece of plastic. I'm actually gonna use my fingernail here because I don't want to tear the cable. I'm gonna carefully fold it, stick it to the edge of the screen. Do the same thing on the longer piece. If you can't get one side, go for the other. Go back again. You can't get either one. Try the tweezers here. There we go. Do the same thing. Flex down. That's good. Again, we have to remember to not touch the front or this inside of the digitizer because the plastic is off. I'm going to carefully pull this piece of tape off. Zoom out now. Peeling the tape off of our flex cable connectors. We're not done getting our Digi together yet. Next step is to get our home button off, which I'll do that. It's been heating up. First step, take the flat end of your spudger. I'm going to start from the edge. Work your way carefully underneath the flex cable. Again, we don't want to damage it here. For this whole thing all the way up to where the bracket and gasket are. Next step does require pretty careful hand. First, we're going to separate the bracket on the left and right with the home button. And next we're going to take the blade and get as close to the screen as you can. Let's see if I'm in there. There is a spacer you want to make sure you get underneath, because if you get it all off in one piece, it's an easier install process. And you don't really pull the home button here. You want to make sure you can get it off in one piece carefully, which there it is. Zoom back out a little bit. Our old Digi is basically now trash. You don't need that anymore. Now for home button, a couple cleanup things. You can remove like old adhesive and all that other stuff. Adhesive on the bracket, you can use your blade to clear off. You just have to be careful to not slip and stab it. Right side's good. Actually, here you can separate the bracket from it to be more careful. This flex is kind of just stuck on there. I just carefully peeled it off. Not my bracket, not my cable. Two separate pieces. Remember, treat that home button like gold because you don't want to damage it and cause Touch ID to not work anymore. If you gotten this far, it would really suck if you damaged it. Alright, so pretty good there with the bracket. Dealing with adhesive, so a couple things. On this one, you can use Tessa 5mm bracket. I got my bracket adhesive down. Now for installing the home button on the screen, this one's a little bit tricky. We wanted to make sure we got all the adhesive off, the flex cable, which we did. My iPad body of the way. I can't touch that inside part because it does have no plastic present. So the trick with the home button, get it in frame. There's 3 layers to the home button. There's the spacer, which is the little plastic ring at the very front. If I can get it closer. That white ring you see there. There's the home button itself, and there's a gasket that goes over everything. It kind of gives you that springy motion that you're used to on an iPad. To get it as close to the original feel as we can, what we do is use what's called E8000. I have the big tube here. It's better to use a small tube because it gives you better precise application, but basically you're putting all these little dots around the edge of it. What that's going to do is allow the spacer to really stick and give you that seal. And this is where you do want to use some tweezers to install it. Check the front side. It is good to pull this front little square thing off. That way you can really get the home button to sit through. If you have excess glue that comes through, that's okay. We can clean it off later with alcohol. It's not a big deal. Really get that home button on there, and then make sure this thing doesn't really stick back down because the bracket has to go under it. Move over. There we go. Take off the two Tessa tape pieces. Just took that off of there. Take my bracket. I'm trying to put it as centered to that little ball that's on the cable as possible. And then a trick here, you want to put a little bit of pressure on the center of the bracket. That does is kind of bend it inwards against that little nub that the home button presses against. So it gives you that clicking motion. Zoom out again. You can use your spudger to kind of press down to around the edges just to make sure everything really sticks. Press it down there in the center. Got a good click there. And the goal with the home button is really to get it to sit as close to the screen as possible. That way you have that original click feel. And it might feel a little harder at first until that E8000 dries. And then the other thing you do is you go back around the edges, just the bottom and the top, and hit it with a little bit more. What that's going to do is give you a seal. That way it doesn't come back up. Biggest issues that people probably have with iPads are lifting and then this right here, just not getting the home button to sit right. Looks like my gasket's pretty stuck on there. And if you are doing this for a customer that's kind of waiting to pick it up, don't rush it because the glue does need a little time to dry. If you just give it back to them right now, there's a chance that the home button's not going to be sitting right. So we'll put it to the side, let it dry a little bit. While that's going on, we're going to put the adhesive on our frame. On the 7th, it's a pretty straightforward process, which is cool because of how wide the sides are. It's quicker. I'm going to take 1mm Tessa, zoom out. Take 1mm Tessa, let me find the starting point. There we go. Gonna lay this corner on the right side. Biggest thing is you want to make sure that no adhesive bleeds to the outside of the frame because you won't be able to see it, especially when it's white screen, since it's a black adhesive that you're using, which is Tessa. Do the other side, same way. Try not to waste any Tessa. Sometimes it takes some practice. It came off on me a little bit, but it's still one piece. We're going to take the five millimeter. We're going to go here. corner. You can try to round it out a little bit if you can, but as long as it gets pretty close to that corner, you should be okay. Same thing on this other side. You're not going directly to the center, because if you do that, it's going to mess with the spacing of the home button. I'll show you what we're going to do for that. Go back to our 1mm. Put a little piece here. Go back to our 5mm on the top side. Try to be fancy here. We've got a little bit of a round corner. That's close. Go all the way along the top. Still frame, yep. Do a smaller piece right here. Actually, we'll go 3mm up here. You want to try not to put a whole lot of adhesive over antennas, just because if you do have to open it up again and you put adhesive where it wasn't before, like right on the antenna, there's a chance that the antenna is going to pull up and you're going to tear it. So don't make more work for yourself. So we look at our frame, test is everywhere. So we are good to go. Next step here, I'm gonna actually test my Digi before I fully install it. Get my alcohol bottle holder. We have my Digitizer. Still messing with my home button a little bit. The home button's something you're gonna have to tweak with a little bit to get good at it. Mine's clicking there. You wanna try to get it as close to the original feel as possible. Plug in. This can be a little tricky too. Kind of just have to feel around the connector until you get it there. Definitely don't mash it down. I'm gonna disconnect this other one just to make sure it's not causing an issue with this bottom one. There we go. Bottom one in. Top one is closed. One looks to be in. Let's slide our home button flex cable back in. I'm not gonna fully install the brackets and stuff yet because I want to make sure this thing is working, not wasting my time. Plug my LCD in. Turn it on, right? Nope, not yet. Why? Because my battery is not in. Won't turn on right now even if I try. I'm taking my guitar pick first. Take it out first actually. Set that out. Battery screw in, LCD down, moment of truth. iPad's not dead. that's happening, one thing I'll show you, this is actually a tip that we give everyone we work with iPads on. Scotch tape is great. You technically want to do this when the LCD is screwed down so it doesn't come back up, but who would have thought? Scotch tape, great cleaning tool. What it's doing is picking up any little shards of glass, adhesive residue, even some of my fingerprints, if there are any. And it's Scotch tape. I mean, everyone has Scotch tape. And if that first thing gets too dirty, grab another roll, or another piece of tape. So my home button is working. That's good. I'm gonna test my Digi here. Edit home screen. Make sure it moves everywhere, which it is. Great. There's my home button again. That's good. Just for fun, let's go test Touch ID. That's still good. Sweet. So that should be the only thing I need to test because I did not touch the speakers or anything else. If you feel like you might have hit something on accident, I would recommend testing the speakers or whatever part you thought you may have hit. That is all good. So now for the fun part, finishing this. Don't do what most people do here. Oh, let me put my LCD screws in. Not yet. We got a couple things on the inside underneath the LCD we gotta take care of first. So lift my LCD back up. First thing, I'm gonna put my home button holder piece back in. I think it's like that right there. That just helps keep the cable down. I grab my bracket, covers all my connections. And if you're thinking to yourself, wow, this is pretty good light in the hotel room, sure. No, I'm just kidding. It's actually not the hotel room's light. I brought a separate lamp for the training because we have learned a long time ago, never take light for granted. We've been to all kinds of training centers and retail stores, and when you may think they have good light, think again, because the light for shopping is not the same as good light for work like this. You have to have good light. This is something we actually don't sell because it's a lamp. If you just go to Amazon, they're like 20 or 30 bucks. They're little LED lamps that fold open. They're great for something like this because they don't take up a lot of space, and like I said, they're pretty portable, so it's easy for me to throw one of these in my suitcase or throw it in a box or something and bring it with me. Alright, so I got all that laid down. I'm going to take my 4 LCD screws now. Another question I'll typically get here is it important where you're putting screws? On certain iPads, some of the LCD screws are different, as well as some of the bracket screws that hold down your flex cables. So, general rule of thumb, put it back where you got it. Don't mix it up. Chances are on iPads it probably won't cause damage because Apple didn't do that as much as on the iPhones, but it's just a good practice to follow. So I don't know if you noticed that I have this bracelet that my wife gave me on. I don't recommend having something that hangs, because I don't know if you can see it, but would not be good to run that across the iPad LCD. Luckily I've kind of gotten accustomed to it, so I know how close I can get to certain things, but you don't want to make that mistake and ruin a $70 part. So at this point, we're almost ready to seal it. Couple quick things. You want to make sure you check the inside of your digitizer for any type of smudges. Best way to do that is lift the plastic up on the inside. Just give it a quick once over. Looks good. Didn't actually touch it earlier, which Well, I prefer leaving the plastic on until the very end, but sometimes, like with the flex cable and the home button, you have to take it off sooner, so it's kind of no way around it. I'm gonna take my Scotch tape again, just do a final cleaning. Looks good. Final thing too is it's good to have some air. Either compressed air, like from a can, or a compressor with a little air gun, because that just helps get the final dust stuff out. I don't have one with me, so I'm doing the best I can with just the Scotch tape, which I think will be fine on this one. I'm gonna peel off all the protective paper that's covering my Tessa tape. So obviously, if you leave that on, your digitizer is not going to stick. I guess let me turn my heating pad off too. I usually leave it on if I'm doing a bunch of iPads. Oh, oops. Definitely don't do that. But I'm only doing the one right now, so I don't have to worry about it. Don't forget this little piece down here by the home button. And the final piece is gonna be on this edge over here. Alright, so here's the tricky part. Don't want your flex cable to stick yet. And while I was doing this, I got some stuff on my LCD. I'm gonna try to clean it a little bit more. Dust in between the LCD and digitizer is super annoying to a customer, so you want to try not to have that. Alright, I'm gonna lay this down. I'm actually gonna stick my far left hand side down first, going all the way to that edge, kind of aligning it. And on this side, I'm gonna take my spudger to make sure that my Digiflex cable sits inside of the frame, so it doesn't get pinched and it does not cause lifting. And once you do that, you're pretty much good to put pressure around the sides of your iPad. And that is an iPad repair. Sealed pretty well. You're typically going to have, if anything, sealing issues on this side where the Digitizer flex cable is, because if, like I mentioned, if that flex cable gets caught between the frame and Digi, it's going to act as sort of like a spring, and it's going to want to keep pushing up on that Digitizer. So if you notice lifting or the symptom of ghosting or issues with your Digitizer now, and ghosting, if you're not familiar with it, is when it moves on its own. You're going to want to lift that screen back up. Hopefully you caught it in time, but if it's been down too long, it'll actually damage the Digitizer flex cable, and you will end up with a permanently ghosting screen, so you would have to change the screen again. So we got the iPad on again. Let's do a final test. My home button's a little bit stiffer than I would like it, but one way to kind of remedy this, get a little bit of alcohol on the tip of your finger, dip it in the dispenser, rub it around that home button area, and then dry it off with a microfiber. That helps neutralize a little bit of the adhesive, and there we go. We've got better click now. And home button is different for everyone. This is the best way we found to do it, just because the spacing of the aftermarket screens is a little bit different than that of the OEM, so it's not perfect, but it is very, very close. What was I doing? Oh, I'm gonna test my Digi. Edit home screen, move this thing around, make sure you still have no dead spots. We're good there, hit home. If you do test that way, I would recommend making sure that you put whatever app you moved back where you got it, so the customer doesn't think you were messing with their apps, which technically you weren't, you were just testing. Cameras, oh no, the camera's not working. Oh, it's because it's against the iPad, or against the mat. There's my old screen. Then I go switch. There we go. There's my top camera. I go home. Let's test my speakers again. Sounds. One thing I didn't show, I just thought of, headphones. Obviously, you plug a pair of headphones in. Just make sure that you can hear sound on both sides, left and right audio. And if you cannot move the headphones around, if it's still not working, maybe try another set of headphones just to be safe. Because sometimes certain headphones won't work. And if it does work with another pair, you're good. If it doesn't, it's going to need a headphone jack replacement. And then testing my Touch ID, still good there. Sweet. Oh, I clicked it. You have to cancel. Then go home. And final would be just make sure it's still charging. Pulling 1.3 amps. And the other thing, the 6-port charger I have, so it has 4 5-volt ports, which is just a standard charger, and then it has 1 Type-C and 1 quick charge port. So the quick charge ports are at 5.2 volts, which is a little bit faster. So if you are wanting to get your iPad charged faster, you think it's not charging as fast, try one of those chargers and that should help. But that's all I have for you guys. So that was an iPad 7 Digitizer complete replacement. A couple things, like I mentioned, that I did not have in this video. A heat gun is a real big help, especially during the opening process. A battery remediation kit, I think is what Apple calls it. So basically, in case of fire type option, Band-Aids, which no blood, no cuts, I'm good. And air is a big one for cleaning. I actually have a compressor out in the truck, but didn't want to wake people up at this hotel, so I did not bring it in. I will be using it in tomorrow's training though. I think I am going to actually post this video just as a raw, here's an iPad repair. See what you guys think. If you have any questions, let me know, but pretty straightforward, and just wanted to show everyone the process. Thanks.